Today, we're diving into a book that didn't just tell a story, it literally changed the course of literature. I'm talking about Chinua Achebe's masterpiece, Things Fall Apart. This novel completely reshaped how the world understood Africa and the deep, brutal scars of colonialism. So let's explore how a vibrant, complex society can be unraveled piece by piece.
This single line from the book, man, it just says it all, doesn't it? It's spoken by Okonkwo's friend Obirika, and it perfectly captures the heart of this tragedy. Imagine a society as a tightly woven cloth, and someone comes along with a knife and just cuts the threads. That's what we're talking about.
And right there, that's the core question Achebe wants us to grapple with. Because, to really get the scale of what was lost, you first have to understand what was there to begin with. What was that fabric like before the knife ever showed up?
See, at its heart, this novel was Achebe's powerful response to decades, even centuries, of misrepresentation. He was tired of the colonial narrative, the one that painted Africa as some dark continent full of primitive people. So he set out to show us a real society, complex, sophisticated, and fully functional, all on its own terms. He uses the richness of Igbo language and tradition to build a world that feels completely alive.
And the person who guides us into this world is Okonkwo. He's this intense, powerful figure, but he's driven by one thing, a deep, profound fear of being seen as weak. He looks at his own father, a gentle, music-loving man, and sees nothing but failure. So Okonkwo spends every waking moment of his life trying to be the exact opposite. And in a way, his personal struggle really mirrors the struggle of his entire culture.
So, what was this world of Umuofia actually like? Let's take a look at how this Igbo society worked, what its values were, before this massive collision of cultures ever happened. Okay, so this was not a simple society. Life was built on these really clear, strong pillars. Yams, for instance, they weren't just food, they were the king of crops. Your wealth, your status, your very masculinity was measured by your yam barn. Language was a total art form, with proverbs being the palm oil with which words are eaten. And their system of justice? It was personified by the Egwugwu, masked men who were believed to be the living embodiments of ancestral spirits. When they passed judgment, it was final.
A really central belief was this idea of a chi, which is kind of like a personal god or one's destiny. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just, oh, it's all fate. Not at all. The Igbo people strongly believed that your own actions could shape your destiny. There's a great proverb that says, when a man says yes, his chi says yes also. You had agency. You had a say in your own life.
And this comparison between Okonkwo and his father, Unoka, just lays it all out perfectly. Okonkwo rejects everything his father stood for: music, gentleness, taking time to just enjoy life. Instead, he embraces strength, hard work, even aggression. He is the ultimate symbol of a man who believes he can bend fate to his will.
So you have this complex, carefully balanced world. And then, everything changes. The knife arrives. When the Christian missionaries show up, it marks the true beginning of the end for the Umuofia we've come to know. The unraveling starts here.
But here's the thing. It wasn't a violent invasion at first. The strategy was much, much smarter and way more insidious. First, they just show up peacefully. Then they start looking for the cracks in the society. They welcome the people on the margins, the Osu outcasts, and those who never quite fit in. They give them a place to belong. And from there, they slowly bring in their own government, their own laws, basically replacing the clan's authority. By winning converts, they split the community right down the middle, from the inside out.
And it's important to see that colonialism didn't just have one face. The first missionary, Mr. Brown, he's actually pretty diplomatic. He tries to understand the Igbo religion, he talks with the elders, but then his replacement, Reverend Smith, comes in, and he is the total opposite. He's rigid, he's intolerant, and he sees the world in black and white. His aggressive style just pours gasoline on the fire.
So you might be asking, why would anyone join them? Well, for someone like Okonkwo's son, Nwoye, it was powerful. He was captivated by the music, the hymns, what he called the poetry of the new religion. But even more than that, Christianity offered him answers for the things in his own culture that he found cruel and couldn't understand, like the practice of leaving twins to die in the forest. It offered a refuge for those who were already questioning.
With these divisions growing deeper and deeper, the whole society becomes a powder keg just waiting for a match. And now we get to the moment that match is lit and everything truly falls apart. The center, as the title says, cannot hold.
This is the point of no return. An over-the-top, zealous convert named Enoch commits the ultimate sin. In public, during a ceremony, he rips the mask off one of the Egwugwu. This wasn't just an insult. In their worldview, it was like killing a god. He literally destroyed the sacred boundary between the human and the divine. For the clan, this is the worst crime you could possibly imagine.
So from the clan's perspective, there's only one possible response to restore cosmic balance. They march to the Christian church and burn it to the ground. Now, for them, this isn't random violence or aggression. This is justice. It's an eye for an eye. They desecrated our spirit, so we will desecrate their holy place.
But here's the thing. Their justice system doesn't matter anymore. The district commissioner, the head of the colonial government, swoops in and arrests the clan's leaders, including Okonkwo. They're jailed, they're beaten, their heads are shaved. It's the ultimate humiliation. And this is that horrifying moment when they all realize, our laws, our gods, our traditions, they mean nothing now. The power has completely shifted.
And that leads us to the novel's devastating end, and maybe its most important point of all, the question of who gets to control the narrative. Whose story is the one that history remembers? Okonkwo, the great warrior, the man who stood for strength and tradition, finally sees that it's over. His world is gone. His people won't go to war. He can't adapt, he won't adapt. And in a final, tragic act of despair, he hangs himself. An act so taboo in his own culture that his own people can't even bury him. And here it is, the final chilling blow. The district commissioner finds Okonkwo's body, and you know what he's thinking? He thinks this man's dramatic story might be worth a reasonable paragraph in the book he's writing. And that right there, that's the title of his book. The entire epic tragedy of Okonkwo's life and the death of his culture reduced to a single, arrogant, dehumanizing line in a colonizer's history book. And that's the question that Achebe leaves us with, and it's a question that still echoes today. He wrote Things Fall Apart to tell the story that men like the district commissioner would never, could never understand. It's a powerful reminder that for every official history that gets written, there are countless other stories, stories of life, of complexity, of tragedy, that are silenced, forgotten, and lost forever. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other stories have we missed?